Some would say, no, there's a line. In my view, and in Brave Angel's view, he said it with clarity. He was following the ground rules. We asked him what he thought. The next question is, what are your concerns about people who agree with you and how they engage in public about this? And that's where he said, there's too much blaming and shaming of women, and he's a follower of Jesus, and there's forgiveness, and there's that too. Okay. When you go below the offensive opinion, if somebody's willing to stay with you, you get to see the complexity and their humanity.
So welcome. We have started a podcast. This is your job now. And you're in, I think, very nice company. We've had President Obama's speechwriter on it. We've had some really distinguished guests, which I consider you to be among the most, because you have certainly challenged me the most of any speaker I've ever heard. So let me introduce you by saying you have totally messed up my brain.
Well, it makes me feel so good.
And I was really anxious to talk with you today because one thing that those who know me know, I value intellectualism, and you are a brilliant speaker who knows everything and anything that I could learn from. So we really appreciate you spending some time. But before we even start that, could you go ahead and introduce yourself in your own words, who you are?
Sure. So Bill Doherty, I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, long-term academic, taught family therapy for 38 years at the University of Minnesota, and a community engaged person, done a lot of work with various sorts of communities. The last 9 years, I've been involved with founding and leading a nonprofit called Brave Angels, which is working on the political divide. Particular interest in how therapy and the broader culture go together, and how we sometimes inadvertently contribute to societal problems and interpersonal problems, and how we can make a difference. So the citizen therapist, I consider myself a citizen therapist.
I always say in my sessions, if I make you feel functionally guilty, then you'll make a change, right? If there's a good thing about guilt sometimes, right? Yeah. And you made me feel incredibly guilty. I'm 27 years into the field. And so I want to thank you for that, because we can become complacent. And as leaders, we often become complacent, right? So it seems to me that you have spent decades trying to bridge this gap. I hate the term unprecedented times, but we are in unprecedented times. I mean, right? The longest shutdown ever. So many of us are affected by that, food stamps, and it goes on. And yet you stay committed to the vision that it's even more important to bridging the gap now.
Yeah.
And you believe that.
I do. I think we have to work on it, because this gap, the gap is polarization. It's how we've come to despise people who differ from us politically, how we've gotten to say it's not worth talking to them, and we stay in our communities and throw rocks at each other. That this is the problem that keeps us from solving all the other problems, because once something gets identified as red or blue solution or red or blue problem, right? Like climate change, then the other side goes away and doesn't want to talk about it.
So we're coming up to some holidays for those who are listening now. And in your world, we're often taught as therapists, or, don't talk about these topics. Just take them off the table. Does that help?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the setting. It depends on your relatives. I think it's during Thanksgiving dinner, when there's actually the table there, it's probably not the best time to talk about, whether Donald Trump should run a third time. And there may be some relatives that you don't feel capable of talking to. But I like to suggest that if we just go silent with people who are different, who think differently, and who are important to us, if we just go silent, it's really hard to keep a democracy going. If we just spread the silence with each other, and we're loud in our own groups about the other side, but we go silent when we're in their presence. This is not how a country can operate. And I don't think it's particularly good for families, but it's not good for the country.
You're the Minnesota, Midwest, right? I'm the New Yorker. Is there anything to like styles and composure? And let's talk a little bit about the real skill of listening, which we don't teach, right? We don't formally take a class. And right. What I noticed in your facilitation, you're a phenomenal listener.
Well, thank you. By the way, I'm from Philadelphia.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I lived on the East Coast. I lived in New York. It's where my wife and I where we go. So I can do East Coast.
Okay. All right. So you speak. Right, okay. Right. So then I'm not off the hook with that. I'm not off the hook.
Not off the hook with that. I'm not off the hook with that. But when you say we don't teach listening, We also, people who know how to listen, like therapists, okay? Often we give ourselves a pass that we don't have to listen to political things we disagree with or values we disagree with. One of the first skills workshops I did after we started Braver Angels was to about 40 people. And there were about a dozen therapists there. And I know that because some of them were my colleagues and they invited other people. And when I asked people to say at the end what they were taking with them from this skills workshop, one of the therapists said, well, I know all these skills, the listening skills and the I messages and so on, but I never thought to apply them to political conversations. So we can be just as judgmental and moralistic and condemning and why should I talk to you? When it comes to politics, we can unskill ourselves from the very things we know how to do.
They're triggers.
That's right. That's right. We allow ourselves to get triggered. Even people who, for a profession, we learn to not get triggered very easily. So I'm saying we can hold ourselves to higher standards.
I would love to hear a success story where you feel like you have been able to repair a community, a group, an organization, where practicing this active listening has really helped build bonds.
Yeah. So one of the projects I'm involved in now is a relationship building exchange between students at Macalester College in St. Paul, which is a private, very liberal college, and University of Northwestern, which is not the one in Chicago. It's a Bible college. It's a Bible college founded by Billy Graham. So we have probably the most liberal college in the state of Minnesota and the most conservative students. And so we have a group of 9 students from each college and the presidents of the 2 colleges and a key faculty member meeting every other week for a meal and then a conversation around topics where we get to know each other and our views beyond stereotypes, look for common ground, and then they have one-to-ones in between. And what they discover is that they have much more in common than differences, and that at some level of humanity, they are brothers and sisters.
Is there, in the rule book, is there something that both parties need to agree to before they can do this?
Well, there's ground rules. So my view is that as long as people agree to have a respectful conversation, not interrupting each other, not name calling each other, that there's nothing that cannot be talked about. So the line is not the topic. The line is not the opinion.
The behavior.
It's the behavior. So we talked about abortion last time, and the most conservative of the students from the Bible college said in his mind, abortion is murder, and that anybody who participates in that, including the woman, should be brought up on charges. That's pretty strong. Okay. I mean, he said it, clearly and firmly. He wasn't shouting and screaming at anybody. Afterwards, he was in a one-to-one with a guy who accepts abortion and does not believe life begins at conception. And one of the things they came up with together is that when a woman goes in for a second abortion, maybe she should be referred to counseling because maybe there's some stuff going on that one of the most extreme things, okay, to say he's 20 years old, okay? He's very intellectually minded. So in my mind, he's following through the logic, okay? He wasn't foamy. He wasn't, because he also said, like, we should not be shaming and blaming women. And these are tragic situations, so he's complicated. Okay. And then he and another guy said, no, maybe, there should be some counseling. I'm not against the abortion, but like, what's going on with her life? So when you asked your question about the line, that's my most recent experience is some would say, no, there's a line. And when you say women should be, adjudicated, blah, 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 that's a line. Well, no. In my view, and in Brave Angel's view, he said it with clarity, he was following the ground rules. We asked him what he thought. But the next question after what's at the heart of this for you is what are your concerns about people who agree with you, how talk about this and how they engage in public about this. And that's where he said, there's too much blaming and shaming of women, and he's a follower of Jesus and there's forgiveness and so there's that too. Okay.
Right.
When you go below the offensive opinion, if somebody's willing to stay with you, you get to see the complexity and their humanity. So
what I'm hearing is we're not trying to change someone's mind. We're not trying to bring them over. We're not trying to convert them over to our world. We're trying to listen and, okay.
Just if I could follow up.
Please.
What we say is we're not trying to change minds about issues. We're trying to change minds about each other.
We had talked about putting pronouns at the end of our signatures, and whether that's an inclusive way or an exclusive way. Can you tell me a little bit about, because we spend so much time including the pronouns in our signatures here at work, right? And saying we welcome everyone. And then you make a very powerful point. Can you share some light on that?
Yeah. So if you are a professional like a therapist who is advertising in the public and exchanging emails, whether you include pronouns or not, there's a statement there. And if you choose to include them, you are signaling. You're signaling to people who may have concerns about the whole trans issue. You are signaling to them what your stance is. And let's face it, you're also signaling in our red-blue divided world, you're signaling you're blue. There's nothing wrong with that. So I have no prescriptions on that, but be mindful about it. In your own mind, you may be saying, well, I'm signaling that I care for all people and I'm inclusive. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But you're doing it in a particular way that is signaling where you are politically. It would be like if you had, Jesus loves all humanity, you're signaling you're a Christian therapist. Okay.
I thought that was a really powerful point. For some reason, I have to share with you that really struck me, because I sort of feel like our brand here is everyone is welcome. And it never occurred to me, well, actually, not everyone is welcome. So I just have to really thank you for that thought. I think it's something for us all to consider the greater picture. I do think, though, that given where we are at this second, I don't know when you're listening to this, the idea of repairing our communities is based upon a hopefulness. This is an intellectual conversation. You have years of studying. You're super smart and very trained as a facilitator. Are you personally this hopeful that we can do this? Do you really think we can do it?
What I like to say is that hope is a choice. I choose hope.
No matter what.
Yeah. Optimism is different. Optimism is this rational thing, but I choose hope. I think it's what's gotten humanity through.
I think we need to name the podcast "We Choose Hope." I think that's a really interesting idea of, are we going in it with hope, or are we entering the conversations? And I'm sure, the general reaction to what you do for a living must be very mixed, right? For the braver angels, there must be. And you're used to it, I'm assuming. That's an assumption. Is that true?
Most people that I encounter take braver angels as a sign of hope. Now, maybe it's the ones who are turned off to it, don't talk to me. But I think there's a small percentage of people on both sides of the continuum who think it's a waste of time, because the job is to beat the others, to beat the crap out of them, okay? Because it's a battle, it's a struggle, and it's win-lose in their own homes and their own families. See, we're not talking about something that's just out there. People are running into this big gap in their own families and among their loved ones.
So I'm going to ask you a pretty tough question, all right, Bill? You have years of experience, and so I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask you the hardest question, which is, what % of any of the populations, red or blue, do you think are birthed in hatred, in racism, in sexism, in all the isms? What % are we talking about?
Who are deeply?
Yes.
A very small percentages.
Yeah.
2 or 3%.
That was a big takeaway I took from yours. I think smaller than we might realize. Just different of opinions, but not based in an
Right. So my own view, we all have these isms in us. Michel Foucault, the famous French deconstructionist, he once wrote that we all have to contend with our inner fascist, personally. And so I think in each of us is a part of ourselves that is prone to othering, is prone to disdain, is prone to wanting to assume power and control, and that for most of us, it's balanced off by other aspects of ourselves. And that leaders come along like orchestra conductors and elicit some of the worst sides of us.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about. So I think the final question is, we have created a series of podcasts about your job now. As a leader, your job now is, and fill in the blank, Bill.
I have to say, I don't want to tell somebody what their job has to be. I'm saying that a potential job, I'm opening up a different kind of job.
Okay. I love it.
Somebody
Okay.
might choose, and that would be to be a bridge builder and healer around the political divide. That's not one that has been among the potential jobs of therapists in the past. It's not been on the list, but it's one that Braver Angels and there's other bridge building organizations. It's one that is now out there as a possibility that if somebody wanted to take that on, and concretely, they could apply to become a moderator of Braver Angels workshops, and that training is free. And then they can connect up with a local chapter and actually be trained to do this work. But aside from that, they can, in their own practice, they can examine their own reflexive tendency to do eye rolling about people who are MAGA, to side emotionally with their client who's saying, I got Uncle Fred at Thanksgiving, I don't know what to do with him, and to side with what they may do in portraying Uncle Fred in a one-dimensional way, as opposed to a three-dimensional human being. The stuff that happens in the room when our own political affiliations come out, try to resist that, and we can try to keep Uncle Fred as a three-dimensional person in our minds and encourage our clients to do that.
I love the visual image of Uncle Fred being at the dinner table.
Yeah. Yeah. And now here's what I do when I give presentations. I say every extended family has an Uncle Fred who is going to set everybody straight about Donald Trump being the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln. Okay. And he's closing in on Lincoln. Okay. He's there to make sure everybody knows that. But they also have a cousin Jessica who on the left is going to fix everybody's language, who when you use the word prisoner is going to say, no, it's a person with experience of the criminal justice system. Okay. And it's going to just crap on you for that. It's easy to tell stories or to think the stories are great of changes of people maybe who are on the right of the political spectrum who haven't been sensitive to, marginalized people who come around, right? And certainly there are those stories, but I want to tell a story about a guy on the left who told me once that he actively discriminated against conservatives for housing. He was a landlord in a number of apartments, and if he had a sense that somebody was a Republican, he would not rent to them. And what he told me is that red is not a protected class, so he can decide who he's going to rent to. He attended a Braver Angels workshop and had an experience, of change. And he told me that the next week he was chatting with somebody who was clearly on the political right. And what he said to this man was, there are people in power who want us to hate each other. Let's not do it. And he cried.
Yeah. When Obama and McCain would sit next to one another.
Yes.
That's what just flashed in my brain. This idea of real grace and dignity to, Yeah, that's a great visual image because Obama's eulogy at McCain's funeral.
Yes. These are our better angels. We don't like ourselves as much when we sit with resentment and contempt for others.
I love it. Bill, you're so generous with your time and you're generous with me with all the probing questions, and you've explained it in a way that really makes a difference. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for helping to repair the community.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to This Is Your Job Now, produced by me, Kai. If this episode made you think or made you feel, we hope it also made you realize you don't have to figure this out all alone. Leadership today is about presence, not perfection. To learn more, follow Wendy Wollner on LinkedIn, subscribe to Balancing Life's Issues on YouTube, or stream the podcast wherever you listen. Because if you're leading people, this is your job now. Anything else to add, Miles?
Yeah.